history, there have been phenomena that exist beyond the boundaries of our understanding. These are not myths or legends confined to ancient texts, but tangible mysteries that continue to baffle scientists, researchers, and witnesses across the globe. From structures that seem to defy the technological capabilities of their time to natural phenomena that challenge our understanding of physics, from unexplained disappearances to objects and places that seem to possess properties beyond conventional explanation, our world is filled with enigmas that resist all attempts at rational explanation. Today, we embark on a journey through some of the most compelling unexplained mysteries that have been documented and witnessed across different continents and cultures. These are not stories manufactured for entertainment, but real occurrences that have been investigated, documented, and remain unsolved despite our advanced technology and scientific knowledge. What makes these mysteries particularly fascinating is not just their inexplicable nature, but the fact that they persist in our modern age, an era where we pride ourselves on having explanations for nearly everything. As we delve into these mysteries, we'll examine the evidence, hear from witnesses, explore the theories that have been proposed, and confront the humbling reality that despite all our advances, there are still aspects of our world that remain completely beyond our grasp. These mysteries remind us that the universe still holds secrets, that the boundary between the known and unknown is far thinner than we might like to believe, and that perhaps some questions are meant to remain unanswered. The ancient monuments scattered across our planet stand as silent testimonies to capabilities that seem impossibly advanced for their time. Consider the precision with which massive stones were cut, transported, and assembled thousands of years ago, creating structures that in many cases we would struggle to replicate even with modern technology. The conventional explanations offered for these constructions often feel inadequate when confronted with the physical evidence. Take, for instance, the megalithic structures found in various locations around the world. In South Lebanon, the ancient site of Baalbek contains some of the largest stone blocks ever used in construction. The Temple of Jupiter stands upon a foundation containing 3 massive stones known as the trilithon. Each of these blocks weighs approximately 800 tons, and they were somehow lifted and positioned with such precision that a piece of paper cannot be inserted between them. But even more mysterious is the stone of the pregnant woman, a block that weighs an estimated 1,000 tons, lying in a nearby quarry. How ancient people managed to conceive of moving such enormous weights, let alone actually accomplishing such a feat, remains completely unexplained. The precision required for such construction becomes even more baffling when we examine the shaping of these stones. Modern analysis has revealed that many ancient megalithic sites feature stonework with tolerances that would be considered impressive even by contemporary engineering standards. The stones fit together with such exactness that the joints between them are nearly invisible, and this precision exists not just on the surface, but throughout the entire depth of the stones. In the high mountains of Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán presents another enigma of ancient construction. The walls of this structure are composed of massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together without mortar in a complex interlocking pattern. The precision of the joints is so exact that the blade of a knife cannot be inserted between the stones. These blocks feature multiple angles and irregular shapes that somehow fit perfectly with their neighbors, like pieces of an incredibly complex three-dimensional puzzle. The conventional explanation suggests that ancient workers achieved this fit through a process of trial and error, repeatedly lifting these massive stones, checking the fit, and adjusting accordingly. However, this explanation becomes increasingly implausible when we consider the sheer weight of these blocks and the physical impossibility of repeatedly lifting and repositioning them with the tools available at the time. The mystery deepens when we examine the surfaces of these stones. Many show evidence of a polishing technique that created surfaces so smooth they appear almost glassy. Some researchers have noted that certain stones appear to have been shaped while in a softened state, as if the rock had somehow been made malleable. The edges and corners show no evidence of the kind of damage one would expect from the hammering and pounding required to shape such hard stone with primitive tools. Across the ocean in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza presents its own series of unexplained features. While much attention has been given to theories about how the pyramid was constructed, less discussed but equally mysterious are the precision and mathematical sophistication embedded in its design. The base of the pyramid is leveled to within less than an inch across its entire width of over 700 feet. The sides of the pyramid are precisely aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy that surpasses many modern buildings. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2 times pi, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of advanced mathematics. Inside the pyramid, the construction of the king's chamber presents engineering feats that puzzle researchers to this day. The chamber is built with massive granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons, transported from quarries over 500 miles away. Above the chamber are 5 stress-relieving chambers built with even larger granite beams, some weighing over 70 tons, positioned with remarkable precision. The mathematics involved in distributing the weight of the pyramid's mass to prevent the collapse of this chamber demonstrates engineering knowledge that seems extraordinarily advanced for the period. But perhaps most mysterious are the internal passages and shafts of the pyramid. Some of these shafts, just 8 inches square, run for over 200 feet through the solid masonry of the pyramid at precise angles. The purpose of these shafts remains debated, but their construction presents a significant mystery. How were such narrow, perfectly straight passages created through solid stone blocks with the tools available at the time? The conventional explanation involves the use of copper tools and wooden mallets, but experiments attempting to replicate the work using these methods have produced results that pale in comparison to the precision found in the actual structure. On Easter Island, nearly 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited land, stands another mystery that has puzzled researchers for centuries. The island is home to nearly 900 massive stone statues known as Moai. These statues, carved from compressed volcanic ash, range from 6 to 30 feet in height and weigh up to 75 tons. The mystery is not just how these statues were carved with primitive tools, but how they were transported from the quarry to locations all around the island, some over 10 miles away, and then erected on ceremonial platforms. Local legend speaks of the statues walking to their locations, a story that was long dismissed as mere mythology. However, recent experiments have shown that the statues could potentially be walked using ropes and a rocking motion. While this provides a possible explanation for transport, it doesn't address several deeper mysteries. Why did the island's inhabitants invest such enormous effort in creating these statues? The island's resources were limited, and the construction of the Moai appears to have consumed a significant portion of the population's time and energy. What drove this obsession with creating and erecting these monuments? Moreover, the construction technique used to carve these statues remains mysterious. The tools found at the quarry are simple stone picks, yet the surfaces of the statues show a level of refinement and detail that seems impossible to achieve with such crude implements. Some unfinished statues remain in the quarry, apparently abandoned mid-construction, creating a frozen moment in time that raises its own questions. Why were they abandoned? What caused the sudden cessation of this monumental construction project? In the jungles of Bosnia, a controversial discovery has sparked intense debate in the archaeological community. A series of hills near the town of Visoko has been identified by some researchers as potentially being ancient pyramids, covered by millennia of soil and vegetation. The largest of these formations, if confirmed as man-made, would be the largest pyramid structure in the world, standing over 700 feet tall. What makes this site particularly mysterious is the presence of features that seem difficult to explain as purely natural formations. Researchers have uncovered what appear to be precisely cut stone blocks, some weighing several tons, arranged in patterns suggesting deliberate construction. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed what some interpret as internal chambers and passages. Perhaps most intriguing is the presence of an extensive network of underground tunnels, featuring walls that appear to have been worked by human hands and supporting pillars made of a concrete-like material. Analysis of this material has produced puzzling results. Some laboratories have identified it as a form of ancient concrete, different from any known natural cement, with properties that suggest it was manufactured rather than naturally occurring. If confirmed, this would push back the date of concrete technology by thousands of years. However, the site remains controversial, with mainstream archaeology generally dismissing the pyramid claims as misidentification of natural geological formations. Yet the questions persist. If these are natural hills, how do we explain the presence of worked stone blocks, the tunnel networks, and the concrete-like material? In the Mediterranean Sea, divers discovered an object that has been called the world's oldest computer. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck dating to approximately 100 BCE, is a complex arrangement of bronze gears and dials. When researchers finally managed to decode its function, they discovered it was an astronomical calculator of remarkable sophistication, capable of predicting the positions of celestial bodies, solar and lunar eclipses, and even accounting for the irregular orbit of the moon. The level of technological sophistication represented by this device is staggering. It contains features such as differential gearing, a technology that wasn't seen again until the 16th century. The precision of its gears, the complexity of its mechanisms, and the astronomical knowledge required to construct it all suggest a level of scientific and technological achievement far beyond what was previously attributed to the ancient world. The mystery is compounded by the fact that this appears to be a singular artifact. We have found no similar devices, no progression of development leading to this level of sophistication, and no mention in ancient texts of such technology. It's as if this impossibly advanced device appeared fully formed, used for a time, and then the knowledge of its construction was completely lost. Across the globe, there are places where the very laws of physics seem to behave differently. These locations, often called gravitational anomalies, present phenomena that challenge our understanding of how the world works. In various mountainous regions, there are roads where vehicles appear to roll uphill when placed in neutral. Balls placed on the ground roll up slopes instead of down. Water appears to flow upward. The conventional explanation for these phenomena involves optical illusions created by the surrounding landscape. The argument is that what appears to be uphill is actually downhill, and our perception is confused by the tilted horizon created by the surrounding terrain. However, this explanation becomes harder to accept when precise measurements with levels and surveying equipment confirm that the slopes are indeed graded in the direction they appear to be. In some locations, the anomaly has been verified using water levels and other instruments that are not subject to optical illusion. Some of these sites also feature other unusual phenomena. Compasses spin erratically or point in unexpected directions. Electronic devices malfunction. Some visitors report feelings of disorientation or dizziness. While local magnetic anomalies might explain some of these effects, they don't adequately address the apparent defiance of gravity. In one location in the Middle East, there's an area where the gravitational anomaly is so pronounced that cars can coast uphill for over a mile. Researchers have repeatedly measured the slope, confirmed that it is indeed an upward grade, and yet objects continue to move upward without any visible force propelling them. Attempts to explain this through magnetic fields or other known forces have been unsuccessful. The phenomenon persists, witnessed and experienced by thousands of visitors, yet remaining without a satisfactory scientific explanation. The ocean depths hold mysteries of their own. In various locations around the world, divers and underwater explorers have discovered structures that appear to be man-made, yet exist at depths or locations that challenge our understanding of ancient civilizations. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument presents a particularly compelling mystery. This massive underwater rock formation features what appear to be terraces, steps, columns, and right angles that seem too precise to be natural. Discovered in the late 20th century, the structure has been the subject of intense debate. Those who argue for a natural origin point to the fact that sandstone can fracture along regular planes, creating formations that appear geometric. However, this explanation struggles to account for some of the formation's more unusual features. There are what appear to be steps, each exactly the same height. There are channels that run in straight lines, making right-angle turns. There are features that look remarkably like roads, walls, and even what might be representations of animals carved into the rock. The depth at which the formation sits adds another layer to the mystery. If it is man-made, it would have been constructed during a time when sea levels were much lower, meaning it would be at least 10,000 years old. This would predate the earliest known civilizations by thousands of years, requiring a complete revision of our understanding of human history. Yet the alternative explanation, that all these features are entirely natural, requires us to accept a series of geological coincidences that seem statistically improbable. In the Mediterranean, another underwater mystery has puzzled researchers. Divers have discovered what appears to be an ancient road or pathway running along the seafloor, made of fitted stones arranged in a clear pattern. The structure runs for considerable distance in a straight line before disappearing into deeper water. Like the Yonaguni monument, this structure would have been above water only during a period of lower sea levels, thousands of years before the rise of Mediterranean civilizations. Who built it? Where did it lead? These questions remain unanswered. The phenomenon of structures appearing in underwater locations where they shouldn't exist extends to lakes as well. In high-altitude lakes in South America, divers have discovered stone structures, temples, and pathways submerged at depths that suggest they were built when the lake levels were much lower. But geological evidence suggests the lakes have been at their current levels for thousands of years, longer than civilizations have existed in these regions. The contradiction between the archaeological evidence and the geological evidence remains unresolved. Throughout the world, there are stones that appear to move on their own, leaving trails across the ground that document their passage. Perhaps the most famous of these are the sailing stones of a dry lake bed in California. For decades, researchers were baffled by these rocks, some weighing hundreds of pounds, that left long tracks across the flat desert floor, with no footprints or signs of human interference nearby. The mystery seemed solved when researchers finally witnessed the phenomenon in action. Under specific conditions, when the lake bed was covered with a thin layer of ice and strong winds blew, the stones would indeed move. However, this explanation, while satisfying for that particular location, doesn't address similar phenomena in other parts of the world where the conditions are different. In some locations, rocks appear to move across surfaces where ice formation would be impossible. In others, the tracks show patterns of movement that seem inconsistent with wind-driven motion, including right-angle turns and circular paths. In certain mountainous regions, there are large boulders perched in positions that seem to defy gravity. These balanced rocks, some weighing thousands of tons, sit on tiny points of contact with the ground, appearing ready to topple at any moment. While some can be explained by erosion patterns that wore away softer rock beneath harder capstones, others seem to lack any reasonable geological explanation for their current position. How they came to be balanced so precariously, and what forces placed them there, remains unknown. In South America, there are spherical stones, some measuring over 6 feet in diameter and weighing up to 15 tons, scattered across jungle terrain. These perfectly round or near perfectly round stones number in the hundreds. The precision of their spherical shape is remarkable, with some varying from perfect roundness by less than a few millimeters. They appear to have been carved from granodiorite, a very hard igneous rock, yet they show a level of precision that would be difficult to achieve even with modern tools. The purpose of these stones is unknown. They're too numerous to be mere curiosities, suggesting they served some function, but what that function might have been remains mysterious. Some are found in alignments that might suggest astronomical significance, but the alignments are not precise enough to be certain. Adding to the mystery is the question of how such perfect spheres were created. Experiments attempting to replicate them using the tools available to ancient peoples have produced spheres, but none with the precision of the ancient examples. The phenomenon of perfectly spherical stones is not limited to South America. In various locations around the world, from Central America to New Zealand to Eastern Europe, similar stone spheres have been found. The consistency of their shape across such diverse locations suggests a shared technique or knowledge, yet there's no evidence of contact between these distant cultures. Each culture that created these spheres appears to have developed the knowledge independently, raising the question of why this particular form held such significance across unconnected civilizations. In the forests of northern Europe, there are areas where trees grow in unusual patterns. In one forest, hundreds of pine trees have trunks that bend sharply at the base, all curving in the same direction before straightening upward. The conventional explanation is that human intervention caused this, that the trees were deliberately shaped for some purpose, perhaps to create curved timber for boat building or furniture. However, this explanation is complicated by the fact that the trees were planted during a period when the technology requiring such curved timber was already obsolete. Why would someone go to the effort of shaping hundreds of trees for a purpose that no longer existed? More mysterious are the forests where trees spiral as they grow, twisting around themselves in patterns that create entire groves of contorted trunks. While some individual twisted trees can be explained by genetic mutations or environmental factors, the presence of entire forests where all the trees display this characteristic suggests something affecting the entire area. Proposed explanations range from unusual magnetic fields to peculiarities in the soil, but none have been definitively proven. There are also locations where trees appear to grow in directions that defy normal gravitational response. On certain hillsides, trees lean sharply away from the vertical in ways that seem inconsistent with the slope of the ground or the prevailing winds. In some cases, trees grow in multiple directions within a small area, as if responding to different gravitational pulls. These patterns persist across generations of trees, with young saplings showing the same unusual growth patterns as the older trees around them, suggesting that whatever causes the phenomenon is ongoing. The phenomenon of unusual plant growth extends beyond trees. In some locations, there are areas where vegetation grows in distinctive circular or spiral patterns. From above, these patterns create geometric designs in the landscape. While some such patterns can be attributed to fungal growth or soil variations, others lack any clear biological or geological cause. The patterns persist year after year, visible in the growth of different types of plants, suggesting that something about the location itself influences how plants grow there. Perhaps among the most perplexing mysteries are the sounds that have been reported around the world, sounds that seem to have no identifiable source. These range from low-frequency hums heard by residents of various cities and towns to mysterious booming noises that rattle windows and shake buildings without any apparent cause. What makes these phenomena particularly frustrating is their selective nature. In many cases, only a percentage of the population can hear the sounds, while others in the same location hear nothing at all. The low-frequency hum phenomenon has been reported in numerous locations across different continents. Residents describe a constant, low-frequency sound like a distant engine or generator that persists day and night. The sound is often more noticeable indoors and at night. For those who can hear it, the hum can be deeply disturbing, affecting sleep and quality of life. Extensive investigations have been conducted in several affected areas, using sensitive sound equipment to try to identify the source, but in most cases, no definitive source has been found. What makes this particularly mysterious is that the hum appears to be frequency-specific, occurring at a particular low frequency across different locations. This consistency suggests a common cause, yet no such cause has been identified. Proposed explanations have included industrial equipment, electrical grids, natural seismic activity, and even psychological factors, but none adequately explain all the characteristics of the phenomenon. The fact that it affects only certain individuals while others in the same location are unaffected adds another layer of complexity. The mysterious booming sounds present a different type of enigma. These are loud, explosive sounds, sometimes accompanied by vibrations strong enough to shake buildings and set off car alarms. They occur without warning, often in areas far from any industrial activity or other obvious sources of such sounds. In some cases, these booms have been heard by thousands of people simultaneously across large geographic areas. Seismic stations sometimes register small tremors coinciding with the sounds, but the tremors are generally too small to account for the intensity of the sounds heard. Various explanations have been proposed for these mystery booms. Some have been attributed to sonic booms from aircraft, but in many cases, aviation authorities confirm that no aircraft were in the area at the time. Others have been explained as meteors entering the atmosphere, but again, in most cases, no meteors were observed. Underground explosions, either from natural gas deposits or seismic activity, have been suggested, but geological surveys of affected areas often find no evidence of such activity. The booms continue to occur, witnessed and experienced by large numbers of people, yet remaining without satisfactory explanation. There are also reports of mysterious sounds in remote natural areas. In certain desert regions, sand dunes are known to produce sounds ranging from low drones to loud booms. While the basic mechanism is understood to involve the movement of sand grains, the precise conditions that produce different sounds and the reason why some dunes sing while similar nearby dunes are silent remains incompletely explained. The sounds can be loud enough to be heard miles away, and some historical accounts describe these sounds as being frighteningly loud and otherworldly. In Arctic regions, there are reports of a sound phenomenon known locally by various names, describing sounds like pistol shots or cracking whips heard on cold, clear nights. The conventional explanation involves ice expanding and cracking, but witnesses often describe hearing the sounds when no ice is present, or when temperatures are stable rather than changing. The sounds are sometimes accompanied by visible flashes of light, creating an even more mysterious phenomenon. The appearance of mysterious lights in the sky has been documented throughout human history, but certain locations seem to be particular hotspots for recurring unexplained aerial phenomena. These are not isolated incidents that can be easily dismissed, but ongoing occurrences that have been witnessed and documented by hundreds or thousands of people, sometimes over generations. In certain valleys in northern Europe, there is a phenomenon of mysterious lights that has been documented for over a century. The lights appear as bright, luminous spheres or irregular shapes that move through the sky, sometimes at great speed, sometimes hovering in one place. They vary in color from white to yellow to red and sometimes appear to split into multiple lights or merge together. The phenomenon occurs with enough frequency that scientific stations have been established to study it, equipped with various instruments to record and analyze the lights. Despite decades of study, the phenomenon remains unexplained. The lights have been photographed and filmed countless times, ruling out simple misidentification or hoaxes. They appear on radar, confirming that they're physical phenomena rather than optical illusions. Analysis has ruled out conventional explanations such as car headlights, aircraft, or atmospheric reflections. Some researchers have proposed that the lights are related to tectonic stress in the valley, somehow producing electromagnetic phenomena, but this theory hasn't been proven. The lights continue to appear, witnessed by locals and tourists alike, documented by cameras and instruments, yet their nature and origin remain unknown. Similar phenomena have been reported in other locations around the world. In certain regions of Australia, there are lights that appear regularly, following similar patterns of behavior. In parts of Asia, there are lights that appear over specific locations with predictable frequency. What's particularly intriguing about these recurring phenomena is that they're often location-specific. The lights appear in particular valleys, over particular patches of terrain, or along particular fault lines, suggesting that something about these specific locations enables or produces the phenomenon. In some cases, the lights appear to exhibit behavior that seems to suggest intelligence or purpose. They've been observed to react to light signals, approaching when flashlights are shined at them. They sometimes appear to follow vehicles or aircraft, matching their speed and direction. They occasionally approach observers directly, coming close enough to illuminate the surrounding terrain. While such behavior could conceivably be explained by natural phenomena responding to stimuli in unexpected ways, it adds an unsettling element to these mysteries. The phenomenon of ball lightning represents another form of mysterious aerial light that has baffled scientists for generations. Unlike the recurring lights in specific locations, ball lightning appears randomly during thunderstorms and sometimes in the absence of storms altogether. Witnesses describe glowing spheres, typically ranging from a few inches to a few feet in diameter, that float through the air, pass through walls and windows, and sometimes explode with considerable force. For many years, ball lightning was dismissed by mainstream science as mistaken observation or exaggeration of conventional lightning. However, the accumulation of consistent witness reports from reliable observers, including scientists and trained observers, eventually led to acceptance that the phenomenon is real. What remains mysterious is its nature. How can a ball of plasma, which should dissipate almost instantly, remain stable long enough to float through a room? How can it pass through solid glass without breaking it? How does it contain the amount of energy that witness reports suggest? Various theories have been proposed involving complex electromagnetic phenomena, exotic forms of matter, or quantum effects, but none have been definitively proven. The phenomenon remains rare enough that it hasn't been extensively studied in controlled conditions, but common enough that it continues to be regularly reported. Photographs and videos purporting to show ball lightning exist, though their authenticity is often debated. The phenomenon stands as a reminder that even something as well studied as lightning still holds mysteries. Unexplained aerial phenomena take on an even more mysterious character in certain historical accounts. Ancient texts from various cultures describe celestial phenomena that don't correspond to any known natural occurrence. These include descriptions of aerial battles, where witnesses reported seeing objects fighting in the sky, descriptions of wheels within wheels in the sky accompanied by fire and light, and accounts of flying shields or ships appearing in the heavens. While modern readers might be tempted to interpret these accounts through a contemporary lens, imposing modern explanations on ancient observations, the striking thing about many of these accounts is their detail and the credibility of the witnesses. These weren't superstitious peasants recording vague impressions, but often educated observers providing detailed accounts of what they witnessed. Some accounts include details such as the duration of the sighting, the direction and speed of movement, the colors observed, and the reactions of multiple witnesses. In some cases, these ancient accounts describe phenomena remarkably similar to modern unexplained aerial sightings. The consistency of certain details across cultures and time periods, from ancient Rome to medieval Europe to pre-colonial Asia, suggests that whatever was being observed, it's a phenomenon that has recurred throughout human history. Whether these observations all stem from the same type of phenomenon, or whether they represent different mysterious occurrences that superficially appear similar, remains unknown. Natural phenomena in Earth's atmosphere and oceans occasionally produce effects that, while explainable in principle, are so rare or unusual that they border on the mysterious. The phenomenon of red tides, where ocean water turns blood red due to algae blooms, has a biological explanation, but the precise triggers for these blooms and their sometimes sudden appearance and disappearance remain incompletely understood. In some historical cases, entire bodies of water have reportedly turned red overnight, an occurrence that seems too rapid for conventional algae bloom processes. There are accounts of the ocean glowing at night, not just with the relatively common bioluminescence of plankton, but with brilliant light that illuminates the entire surface as far as the eye can see. While bioluminescent organisms provide a partial explanation, the intensity and extent of some reported occurrences seem to exceed what known organisms could produce. Historical records describe ships passing through seas that glowed so brightly that it was possible to read by the light they produced, a level of illumination that seems extraordinary. Instances of unusual precipitation have been recorded throughout history. While rain is obviously common, there are well-documented cases of rain consisting of things other than water. Falls of fish, frogs, and other small animals have been recorded numerous times across different centuries and locations. The conventional explanation involves waterspouts or tornadoes sucking up animals and depositing them elsewhere, but this explanation faces challenges. In many cases, the fallen animals are all of the same species and similar size, suggesting some sort of sorting mechanism that seems implausible in a chaotic weather event. In some cases, the falls occur in the absence of any nearby body of water that could have been the source. The animals are sometimes alive and apparently uninjured, which seems unlikely if they had been caught up in violent weather phenomena. There have been reports of falls of materials that are even more difficult to explain. Falls of blood-red rain have been documented in various locations. While some such events have been explained by Saharan dust or pollen giving rain a reddish tint, in other cases, analysis of the red material has produced puzzling results. In one relatively recent case, red rain that fell in South Asia was found to contain unusual cells that some researchers claimed were unlike any known terrestrial organism. While mainstream science has challenged this interpretation, the exact nature and origin of the cells remains debated. Falls of ice chunks from clear skies present another mystery. There are numerous documented cases of blocks of ice, some weighing many pounds, falling from the sky when no aircraft were overhead and no storm clouds were present. While some have been explained as waste from aircraft lavatories, this doesn't account for cases that occurred before the age of aviation or for ice falls in remote areas far from any flight paths. The ice appears to have formed in the atmosphere somehow, but under conditions where ice formation shouldn't occur. The phenomenon of strange sounds emanating from the Earth itself has been documented in various locations. In certain areas, sounds described as groaning, humming, or rumbling emanate from the ground, sometimes continuously, sometimes periodically. These sounds have been recorded and verified by scientific instruments, confirming that they're real physical phenomena. While some can be attributed to underground water movement or settling rock, others lack any clear geological explanation. In one mountainous region, there's a location where a loud humming sound emanates from the rock face. The sound is constant, varying in intensity but never completely stopping. It's loud enough to be clearly audible from a considerable distance. Geological surveys have failed to identify any underground voids, water sources, or other features that would explain the sound. The rock itself, when analyzed, shows no unusual properties. The sound continues, as it apparently has for generations according to local records, without explanation. There are places where the earth itself seems to breathe. In certain caves and rock formations, there are locations where air rushes in and out with rhythmic regularity, creating the impression of breathing. While some such phenomena can be explained by temperature differentials or barometric pressure changes affecting air pressure in sealed or partially sealed underground spaces, the regularity and strength of the air movement in some cases seem disproportionate to these explanations. In some locations, the air movement is strong enough to create audible sounds and is regular enough to set a clock by, yet no adequate explanation for the driving mechanism has been found. The mystery of disappearing lakes and rivers has puzzled observers for centuries. In various locations around the world, bodies of water have been known to suddenly drain away, disappearing completely in a matter of hours or days. While some such occurrences can be explained by underground caves or sinkholes opening up, in other cases no such features have been found. The water simply vanishes, leaving a dry basin where a lake or river had been. Sometimes the water returns just as mysteriously as it disappeared, welling up from underground sources to refill the basin. In one location, there's a lake that follows a predictable but mysterious cycle. Every few years, the entire lake drains away through an apparent opening in the lake bed. The water disappears completely, leaving the lake bottom exposed. Then, after a period of time, the water returns, bubbling up from below to refill the lake. This cycle has been observed and documented for generations, yet the mechanism driving it remains unclear. The underground hydrology of the area has been studied extensively, but no satisfactory explanation for the regular draining and refilling has been found. There are rivers that disappear into the ground and don't appear to emerge anywhere downstream. Attempts to trace their underground course by introducing dyes or other markers have sometimes failed, with the markers never appearing at any outlet. Where does the water go? How can a significant flow of water disappear into the earth and leave no trace? These questions remain unanswered. The phenomenon of spontaneous fires has been documented throughout history. These are not cases of arson or accidents with obvious ignition sources, but instances where fires appear to start spontaneously, sometimes in the presence of witnesses. Objects burst into flame without any apparent source of ignition. People have reported items in their homes repeatedly catching fire, even after all possible ignition sources have been removed. Investigations have failed to identify any natural or man-made cause for the fires. In some cases, these fires appear to have properties that make them even more mysterious. They sometimes burn with unusual intensity, consuming materials that should be difficult to ignite while leaving more flammable materials nearby untouched. They sometimes produce little or no smoke, or produce smoke with unusual properties. In some historical cases, fires have been reported that burned without consuming the material they were burning, though such reports are difficult to verify and could be attributed to exaggeration or misperception. The related phenomenon, sometimes referred to in older literature as spontaneous human combustion, represents one of the most disturbing of unexplained mysteries. There are documented cases, investigated by fire marshals and forensic experts, where human bodies have been found burned to ash in circumstances that seem to defy explanation. The bodies show a level of destruction that requires extremely high temperatures sustained over considerable time, yet the surroundings show minimal fire damage. In some cases, the room containing the victim shows only slight burning in the immediate vicinity of the body, with furniture, papers, and other flammable materials mere feet away remaining unscathed. The conventional explanation involves the wick effect, where the victim's clothing acts as a wick and their body fat as fuel, creating a slow-burning fire that consumes the body. While this can explain some aspects of the phenomenon, it struggles to account for the extreme degree of destruction sometimes seen or the lack of fire spread to the surroundings. Experimental attempts to replicate the conditions have generally required external heat sources to maintain combustion, something that wouldn't be present in these cases. Adding to the mystery is the fact that in some cases, not all of the body is consumed equally. Often the extremities, such as lower legs and feet, remain relatively intact while the torso is reduced to ash. This pattern of burning doesn't correspond to what would be expected from any conventional fire scenario. The cases remain rare but consistently documented across different time periods and locations, each one presenting the same puzzling characteristics. The appearance of markings or formations in crops has been a documented phenomenon for centuries, but the modern manifestation of this phenomenon has reached levels of complexity that defy easy explanation. While simple circular formations could conceivably be created by whirlwinds or other natural phenomena, The geometric precision and intricate designs of many documented formations seem to require deliberate creation. The mystery is not whether some of these formations are created by people as hoaxes or art projects. Clearly, some are. The mystery lies in those formations that appear to possess characteristics that make human creation difficult to explain. Some appear overnight in areas under observation, without anyone witnessing their creation. Some feature formations in the crops that plant biologists cannot explain through any known process of mechanical flattening. In some cases, the plants are not broken but bent at the nodes and continue growing in their new horizontal orientation, something that doesn't occur when plants are simply trampled or pushed over. Analysis of plants from some formations has revealed unusual characteristics. In some cases, the cellular structure of the plants appears altered in ways that suggest exposure to intense heat, yet there's no burning or other visible heat damage. Some formations have been found to have unusual electromagnetic readings or anomalies in the local magnetic field. Soil samples from some formations have shown unusual chemical compositions or the presence of magnetic particles not found in the surrounding soil. The complexity and size of some formations add to the mystery. Some cover areas of several acres with geometric precision that would be challenging to achieve even with modern surveying equipment, yet appear overnight with no evidence of the equipment or the number of people that would be required for their creation. The designs sometimes incorporate advanced mathematical principles, fractal patterns, or symbolic systems from various ancient cultures. Skeptics point out that increasingly complex formations have appeared as human circle-making techniques have become more sophisticated, suggesting that human creation can account for even the most complex examples. However, this doesn't address formations that appear in locations where human access would be difficult, or that appear under conditions where human creation seems improbable. The phenomenon continues, with new formations appearing each year, some showing characteristics that continue to puzzle researchers. The phenomenon of objects appearing or disappearing without explanation has been reported throughout history. These are not cases of simple misplacement, but instances where objects vanish from secured locations and sometimes reappear in impossible places, or where objects appear in locations where they cannot have been placed by any normal means. There are documented cases of objects disappearing from locked rooms and reappearing in other locked spaces to which no one had access. Objects have been reported falling from ceilings in rooms where the ceiling is solid with no space above from which objects could fall. In some cases, these appearances are witnessed by multiple people, ruling out individual hallucination or mistake. One particularly well-documented case involved objects appearing in a residence over a period of weeks. The objects included personal items belonging to the residents that had been lost years before, items that should not have been in the house, and in some cases, items that appeared to have historical value but whose origin could not be determined. The appearances were witnessed by the residents, investigators, and journalists. The house was thoroughly searched and monitored, yet objects continued to appear. No explanation was ever found for how the objects were getting into the house. The phenomenon of stones or other objects being thrown by no visible means has been reported in numerous locations. These are cases where, in the presence of multiple witnesses, stones fall from the air inside buildings or in enclosed spaces where no one could have thrown them. The stones sometimes fall with unusual trajectories, appearing to move slowly or to change direction in mid-flight. In some cases, the stones are warm or hot when they land, despite being ordinary local stones. Attempts to document and explain these phenomena through long-term observation have generally failed. The phenomena seem to resist systematic study, often ceasing when intensive monitoring begins, only to resume when attention wanes. This pattern has led some researchers to suggest that whatever causes these phenomena might be reactive to observation, but such a suggestion raises more questions than it answers. The appearance of marks or symbols in unexpected places presents another category of mystery. There are cases of markings appearing on surfaces that were under observation or in secured locations. These include cases of handprints, footprints, or symbols appearing on surfaces in ways that seem to preclude any normal means of creation. In some historical cases, such markings were accompanied by other phenomena, such as unusual sounds or smells, creating a multifaceted mystery. One puzzling subset of this phenomenon involves marks that appear to have been created by intense heat or pressure, burned or pressed into surfaces, yet appearing in locations where the application of such heat or pressure seems impossible. The marks sometimes appear on interior surfaces in sealed spaces or on surfaces that were under constant observation. The precision and detail of some marks suggests deliberate creation rather than random natural phenomena, yet no method of creation can be determined. Throughout this exploration of mysteries, a pattern emerges. These are not isolated, one-time occurrences that can be easily dismissed as mistakes, hoaxes, or misidentifications. These are persistent, recurring phenomena documented across time and location, witnessed by credible observers, investigated by scientists and researchers, yet remaining without satisfactory explanation. The advancement of technology and science, rather than explaining these mysteries away, has in many cases only confirmed their reality while deepening their mysterious nature. As we conclude this first part of our journey through the unexplained, we're left with a humbling realization. Despite all our advances, despite our sophisticated instruments and our confident assertions about understanding the world, there remain phenomena that exist beyond our comprehension. The mysteries we've explored aren't failures of observation or gaps in knowledge that will be easily filled by future research. They represent something more fundamental, the possibility that there are aspects of reality that operate by principles we don't understand, or perhaps can't understand with our current frameworks of knowledge. These mysteries serve as reminders that the universe is stranger and more complex than our theories would suggest. They challenge our assumptions about what is possible and what is impossible. They suggest that the boundaries between the known and the unknown are not fixed but permeable, that the world still holds secrets that resist our most determined efforts to uncover them. In the second part of our exploration, we will delve deeper into mysteries of time and space, examine phenomena that challenge our understanding of consciousness and reality itself, and explore questions about ancient knowledge that seems impossibly advanced. We will continue our journey through the unexplained, encountering phenomena that are even more challenging to our conventional understanding of the world. The mysteries continue, as persistent and inexplicable as they have ever been, waiting to be explored by those brave enough to confront the limits of human knowledge. The nature of time itself becomes questionable when we examine certain documented phenomena that suggest time may not flow as uniformly or predictably as we assume. There are locations around the world where clocks and watches behave erratically, running faster or slower than they should, sometimes stopping altogether, only to resume normal function when removed from the location. While electromagnetic interference can explain some such occurrences, there are cases where no such interference can be detected, yet the effect on timepieces persists. In certain areas, multiple visitors have independently reported experiencing time differently. What feels like minutes turns out to have been hours, or conversely, what seems like an extended period turns out to have been mere minutes. These aren't simple instances of losing track of time through distraction or engagement, but cases where people with watches report being shocked at the discrepancy between their perception of elapsed time and what their watches show. Even more puzzling are cases where groups of people experience this distortion collectively, with all members of the group sharing the same altered time perception. There are documented cases of people reporting missing time, periods where they cannot account for their whereabouts or activities. In some instances, these gaps coincide with journeys where the travel time far exceeded what should have been required. A trip that should take 30 minutes instead takes 3 hours, with no memory of the intervening period and no explanation for where the time went. The individuals involved were not impaired, were in good health, and had no history of such experiences. The vehicles showed the expected mileage for the journey, confirming they traveled the route, but the time discrepancy remains unexplained. Conversely, there are reports of impossible journeys where people arrive at destinations far sooner than should be physically possible. These cases are harder to document because they often go unreported. Someone arriving early simply waits rather than questioning how they got there so quickly. However, when such cases are noticed and investigated, they present a genuine puzzle. How can someone travel a distance that should require 2 hours and 45 minutes when there's no possibility of speeding or taking shortcuts and when traffic conditions were normal? The phenomenon, sometimes called time slips, represents an even more mysterious category. There are accounts, some quite detailed and from credible witnesses, of people apparently experiencing locations as they existed in the past. These are not vague impressions or feelings, but detailed observations of buildings, people, and scenes that correspond to historical records of how a location appeared decades or centuries earlier. The experiences are typically brief, lasting minutes, after which the scene returns to the present, leaving the witness confused and disoriented. One of the most famous such cases involved 2 academics visiting a historical site in Europe. They reported walking through gardens that no longer existed, encountering people in period clothing who seemed as real as anyone they might meet, and observing buildings in configurations that hadn't existed for over a century. Their account was detailed and consistent, and they independently drew maps of what they had seen that matched historical records of the location's layout in the 18th century, records they had not seen before their experience. Despite extensive investigation and skeptical analysis, no conventional explanation for their experience has been accepted. Similar experiences have been reported in various locations, often in places with long histories. Witnesses report seeing streets as they existed before modern development, encountering vehicles from past eras, or observing people in clothing from earlier periods, all appearing completely solid and real. The experiences end abruptly, with the scene shifting back to the present in an instant. While skeptics attribute these to hallucination or hoax, the consistency of details with historical records the witnesses had no access to presents a challenge to easy dismissal. There are also reports of the inverse phenomenon, where people claim to have perceived future events. These go beyond simple premonitions or vague feelings, extending to detailed observations that later prove accurate. There are documented cases of people describing in detail events or scenes they later encounter, sometimes years later. The descriptions are specific enough that they cannot be attributed to lucky guesses or general predictions. One documented case involved an individual who described in detail a building they would later work in, including specific architectural features, the layout of rooms, and even the view from particular windows. The description was documented years before they ever visited the location. When they eventually did encounter the building, it matched their previous description in every detail, including unusual architectural quirks that would be unlikely to guess. The building was not in a location they had any connection to or reason to encounter at the time of the description, making prior knowledge seem impossible. The phenomenon of precognitive dreams has been reported throughout history, but some cases stand out for their specificity and documentation. There are instances where individuals have described dreams in detail to others, only to have those exact scenarios play out in reality, sometimes including details that would have been impossible to predict through any normal means. In some tragic cases, people have reported dreams of disasters before they occurred, including specific details about the nature and location of the events. The challenge with precognitive phenomena is determining what constitutes genuine precognition versus coincidence or reconstructed memory. Human memory is malleable, and it's easy to believe we predicted something after the fact. However, there are cases where the predictions were documented before the events, eliminating the possibility of false memory. The mechanism by which information from the future could reach the past remains completely unexplained by any current scientific framework. Ancient knowledge presents another category of mystery. There are indications in ancient texts and structures that civilizations possessed knowledge or capabilities that seem anachronistic for their time period. This isn't a matter of ancient aliens or lost super-civilizations, but documented evidence that our ancestors knew things we wouldn't expect them to know, or could do things we wouldn't expect them to be able to do. Consider the astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient structures. Multiple ancient sites around the world are aligned to celestial events with precision that suggests detailed astronomical observation and sophisticated mathematical knowledge. These alignments aren't simple observations of sunrise or sunset, but precise markers of events like the solstices, equinoxes, and more complex celestial cycles. Some ancient structures mark the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes approximately 26,000 years to complete. For ancient peoples to have known about this cycle, they would have needed to maintain consistent astronomical observations across generations, tracking subtle changes that only become apparent over centuries. The dedication and organizational structure required for such long-term observation seems extraordinary for cultures we generally think of as primitive. The precision of some ancient astronomical alignments is remarkable. There are structures aligned to celestial events with accuracy within fractions of a degree. Achieving such precision requires not just observation, but sophisticated measurement tools and mathematical knowledge. How ancient peoples achieved these alignments without telescopes or modern surveying equipment remains unclear. Beyond alignments, there's evidence that ancient cultures possessed detailed astronomical knowledge that seems to predate the invention of instruments that should have been necessary to acquire such knowledge. Ancient texts describe the moons of planets that aren't visible to the naked eye, details of celestial bodies that should have required telescopes to observe, and understanding of astronomical cycles that should have required centuries of detailed observation. In one ancient culture's texts, there are descriptions of planetary bodies that include details about their appearance and properties that match what we know from modern astronomical observation, but which should have been invisible to ancient observers. How did they acquire this knowledge? Did they have observational tools more sophisticated than we've given them credit for? Or did they possess knowledge passed down from an even earlier source? The mathematical knowledge demonstrated in ancient texts also presents puzzles. Some ancient manuscripts contain mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally developed in recognized mathematical traditions for centuries or millennia. There are examples of sophisticated number theory, geometric principles, and even what appear to be early versions of calculus in texts that predate the conventional historical development of these fields. Ancient maps present their own mysteries. There are maps that appear to show coastlines with accuracy that shouldn't have been achievable at the time of their creation. Some show features that weren't discovered or mapped by modern explorers for centuries after the maps were drawn. The conventional explanation is that these maps were copied from earlier sources, but this only pushes the mystery back in time. If these maps were copied from earlier sources, where did those original sources get their information? One controversial ancient map appears to show coastal features with a level of detail suggesting aerial or satellite view. The map shows river deltas, island chains, and coastal configurations that match modern surveys, but which would be extremely difficult to determine from sea-level observation. More mysteriously, some researchers claim the map shows certain regions as they would appear without ice coverage, suggesting it might be based on observations from a time before the last ice age, though this interpretation remains highly contested. The question of ancient technological capabilities extends to manufacturing and materials. There are ancient artifacts that demonstrate manufacturing techniques that seem advanced for their time period. Precision metalwork, the creation of materials with properties that would seem to require sophisticated metallurgy, and the production of objects that show evidence of machining or manufacturing processes that shouldn't have existed. In some ancient sites, there are stone objects that show such precision of form that they appear to have been created with machine tools. Perfectly flat surfaces, precise angles, and symmetry that would be challenging to achieve with hand tools alone. Analysis of these objects shows no tool marks consistent with hand working, leading to questions about how they were produced. There are ancient metal objects whose composition and properties puzzle modern metallurgists. Alloys that shouldn't have been producible with ancient smelting techniques, metals refined to a purity that should have required processes not available at the time, and objects that show no corrosion despite being thousands of years old, suggesting either unusual composition or treatment with protective processes we don't understand. One ancient pillar, standing exposed to the elements for over a millennium, shows virtually no rust or corrosion. Analysis reveals it's made of iron with unusual purity and a composition that somehow prevents oxidation. How ancient metalworkers achieved this, whether through some special smelting process, some treatment applied to the finished pillar, or some property of the ore source itself, remains unknown. Modern attempts to replicate the pillar's corrosion resistance have been only partially successful. The existence of ancient batteries presents another puzzle. In certain ancient sites, objects have been found that appear to function as galvanic cells capable of producing electrical current. These consist of clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods, which when filled with an acidic liquid, produce a measurable voltage. The conventional interpretation is that these were used for electroplating, though no definitively electroplated objects from the period have been found. The puzzle is why, if ancient peoples had discovered electricity, there isn't more evidence of its use. Ancient surgical instruments present evidence of medical knowledge and capabilities that seem surprisingly advanced. There are ancient texts describing surgical procedures, including brain surgery, with detailed instructions suggesting practical experience rather than theoretical speculation. Ancient skulls have been found showing evidence of successful trepanation, where holes were bored into the skull and the patient survived, as evidenced by healing around the edges of the holes. Some ancient medical texts describe procedures and treatments that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of anatomy and physiology. There are descriptions of treatments that, from a modern medical perspective, make scientific sense and show understanding of principles that weren't formally established until modern times. How ancient physicians arrived at this understanding without modern tools for studying anatomy and physiology remains unclear. Ancient texts also describe substances and preparations with specific medical properties. In some cases, modern analysis has confirmed that these substances do indeed have the medicinal properties attributed to them, sometimes through mechanisms that require modern biochemistry to understand. Did ancient peoples discover these through trial and error, or did they possess some way of analyzing substances that we don't know about? The ancient acoustic engineering presents another mystery. Some ancient structures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of acoustics, incorporating features that manipulate sound in precise ways. There are ancient theaters where a whisper on stage can be heard clearly in the back row, hundreds of feet away, without amplification. The acoustic properties of these structures aren't accidental but result from careful design. More mysteriously, there are ancient chambers that appear designed to resonate at specific frequencies. When sound at these frequencies is produced in these chambers, the entire structure vibrates in ways that create unusual effects. Some researchers have reported that these resonances produce altered states of consciousness in people present in the chambers, though such claims remain controversial and difficult to verify. In some ancient structures, there are features that seem to serve no structural purpose but which create complex acoustic effects. Certain walls or pillars, when struck, produce musical tones. The tones from different elements sometimes form harmonic relationships, suggesting deliberate tuning. Why ancient builders would go to such effort to create these acoustic features remains unclear. The alignment of ancient sites to each other presents another layer of mystery. There are claims that ancient structures separated by thousands of miles are aligned to each other with precision, suggesting intentional relationship. When lines are drawn connecting certain ancient sites, the lines pass through multiple other ancient sites, creating a network of alignments that seems unlikely to be purely coincidental. The interpretation of these alignments is highly controversial. Skeptics point out that with enough ancient sites worldwide, some alignments are inevitable by pure chance. They also note that the Earth is curved, so straight lines on a map don't correspond to actual straight lines on the ground. However, proponents of intentional alignment argue that some of the alignments are too precise and involve too many sites to be easily dismissed as coincidence. More intriguing are cases where ancient sites separated by vast distances show other similarities beyond alignment. Similar architectural features, similar astronomical alignments, similar myths and symbols, all in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The conventional explanation involves independent development of similar ideas, which is certainly possible, but the degree of similarity in some cases seems to strain this explanation. The possibility of ancient global navigation raises questions about how isolated ancient cultures really were. There is controversial evidence suggesting contact between cultures separated by oceans, long before such contact was thought possible. There are plants native to one continent that appear in archaeological contexts on other continents before the generally accepted dates of transoceanic contact. There are artistic motifs and architectural styles that appear in widely separated regions with suspicious similarity. Ancient texts from various cultures describe long sea voyages to distant lands. While these texts are often dismissed as mythology or exaggeration, some contain navigational details and descriptions of places that suggest they might be based on actual voyages. There are ancient harbor facilities and what appear to be docks in locations that seem surprisingly sophisticated for the presumed level of ancient maritime technology. The question of lost ancient civilizations remains one of the most contentious mysteries. There are suggestions in various ancient texts of earlier civilizations, some described as possessing great knowledge or capabilities. These are generally dismissed as mythology, but some researchers argue that myths might preserve distorted memories of real historical events or peoples. The problem with investigating lost civilizations is the paucity of evidence. If such civilizations existed, where is the physical evidence? One answer is that most of Earth's surface is unexplored. The ocean floor, vast areas of jungle, regions buried under ice or desert, all could potentially harbor ruins that have never been found. Another consideration is that organic materials decay, and civilizations that built primarily with wood or other perishable materials might leave little trace after thousands of years. There are underwater sites that some researchers claim show evidence of very ancient human construction. These sites are controversial, with mainstream archaeology generally interpreting them as natural formations. However, some features of these sites seem difficult to explain as purely natural. There are what appear to be walls, roads, and even carved symbols, all in configurations that at least superficially resemble human construction. The dating of these underwater sites depends on when they would have been above water. If they are indeed man-made, they would have to date from periods of lower sea level, potentially placing them in time periods before complex civilizations are thought to have existed. This conflict between apparent age and presumed capability is the core of the controversy. On land, there are sites whose age remains controversial. Some structures that show evidence of great age also show evidence of sophisticated construction techniques. If the dating is correct, they would predate the cultures to whom they're attributed, raising questions about who actually built them. Dating ancient stone structures is challenging because stone itself can't be carbon dated, and the dating must rely on associated organic materials or other indirect methods. There are structures built on top of or incorporating much older structures. In some cases, the older structures show more sophisticated construction than the later additions. This inverted development, where older equals more advanced rather than less, contradicts the usual assumption of progressive technological development. The conventional explanation is that earlier, more sophisticated builders were followed by less capable cultures who built upon the ruins, but this raises questions about what happened to the earlier culture. The mystery of ancient power sources has been a subject of speculation. Some ancient sites show evidence of sophisticated lighting, with chambers deep underground that show no evidence of soot or smoke damage despite being decorated with detailed artwork that would have required bright light to create. The conventional explanation involves mirrors or polished surfaces reflecting sunlight into the depths, but reconstructions of these systems have proven challenging. There are ancient texts that describe lights that burned continuously without fuel. While these descriptions are generally assumed to be metaphorical or mythological, some are quite specific in their details, describing physical objects with particular properties and maintenance requirements. Whether these descriptions represent some technology that has been lost or are purely fictional remains debated. The question of how ancient peoples moved massive stones over long distances continues to puzzle researchers. While various theories have been proposed and experiments conducted, some aspects of ancient megalithic construction remain unexplained. The precision required to position stones weighing hundreds of tons, the method of lifting them to significant heights, and the logistics of quarrying, transporting, and erecting thousands of such stones for a single structure all present challenges. Modern experiments attempting to replicate ancient construction techniques using only technologies available at the time have met with limited success. While it's possible to move large stones using primitive methods, the speed, scale, and precision achieved by ancient builders has proven difficult to match. This doesn't mean it was impossible, but it suggests that ancient techniques were more sophisticated than simple ropes and levers. There are indications in some construction techniques of knowledge that seems advanced for the period. The use of interlocking stones to create earthquake-resistant structures shows sophisticated engineering understanding. The incorporation of drainage systems, load distribution features, and other engineering elements suggests knowledge that would normally be attributed to much later periods. The study of ancient languages and scripts reveals its own mysteries. There are ancient writing systems that have never been deciphered, texts whose meaning remains unknown despite extensive efforts by linguists. In some cases, we don't even know what language these texts are written in. They might record something mundane or they might contain significant knowledge, but without decipherment, we simply don't know. Some ancient scripts appear to have been deliberately obscure, using complex encoding or symbolic systems that suggest the information was meant to be kept secret. These encrypted texts, created thousands of years ago, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of cryptography. The question of what information was considered important enough to encrypt and why it needed to be kept secret remains unanswered. There are also ancient texts whose content, when translated, contains information that seems anachronistic, descriptions of devices, processes, or phenomena that shouldn't have been known at the time the text was written. The conventional approach is to interpret these passages metaphorically or assume they've been mistranslated, but some are quite specific and detailed in ways that resist metaphorical interpretation. The phenomenon of ancient predictions presents another mystery. Some ancient texts contain predictions of future events that, when interpreted in hindsight, seem remarkably specific. The challenge is determining whether these are genuine predictions or whether they're vague enough that they can be interpreted to match whatever events occur. However, some predictions include details specific enough that they seem to go beyond simple lucky guessing or vague prophecy. There are also ancient astronomical predictions, calculations of eclipses and planetary positions far in the future that proved to be accurate when checked against modern astronomical calculations. The mathematics and astronomical knowledge required to make these predictions seemed sophisticated for the period, raising questions about how this knowledge was acquired. The mystery of ancient maps showing lands supposedly unknown at the time they were drawn raises questions about the extent of ancient geographical knowledge. If these maps are authentic and not modern forgeries, they suggest ancient peoples had access to geographical information beyond what we've credited them with. The source of this information, whether from lost voyages, earlier civilizations, or some other means, remains mysterious. Some ancient world maps show a degree of accuracy in depicting continental shapes and relative positions that seems remarkable for their age. While the maps are not perfectly accurate by modern standards, they show knowledge that would seem to require extensive maritime exploration. The question is whether such exploration occurred and when unrecorded, or whether the maps were based on earlier sources now lost. The existence of ancient observatories demonstrates sophisticated astronomical observation capabilities. These aren't simple structures for marking the solstices, but complex installations capable of tracking multiple celestial cycles and making detailed observations. The commitment of resources to build these observatories and maintain the observations over generations suggests astronomy was of central importance to these cultures. Some ancient observatories incorporate features whose purpose remains unclear. There are alignments to celestial events that occur only rarely, in cycles spanning centuries. Why would ancient peoples create markers for events they might never witness in their lifetimes? This suggests long-term thinking and cultural continuity that allowed knowledge to be preserved across generations. The precision of some ancient astronomical observations, as recorded in ancient texts, is remarkable. Positions of planets, timing of eclipses, and other astronomical events are recorded with accuracy that would seem to require precise measurement instruments. The nature of these instruments, if they existed, remains unknown, as no examples have been definitively identified in the archaeological record. The phenomenon of ancient sites built to astronomical alignments that become significant only when viewed from specific vantage points adds another layer of mystery. There are structures whose astronomical significance is only apparent when viewed from a particular location, sometimes from a mountain top or other high point miles away. This suggests the builders were coordinating multiple sites into a larger system, requiring a level of planning and organization that seems sophisticated. Ancient understanding of the calendar presents interesting puzzles. Some ancient cultures used calendar systems of remarkable sophistication, accounting for the discrepancy between the solar year and lunar cycles, incorporating corrections that keep the calendar aligned with the seasons over long periods. Developing such calendars requires extended astronomical observation and mathematical sophistication. More mysteriously, some ancient calendars appear to be based on cycles that don't correspond to any obvious astronomical phenomenon, counts of days that don't align with any celestial cycle, yet which were clearly important to the culture that created them. The significance of these counts, what they were measuring or marking, remains unknown. The ancient understanding of geography raises questions about how extensive their exploration was. Ancient texts sometimes describe distant lands with details that suggest actual observation rather than imagination. Mountain ranges, rivers, climate conditions, and other geographical features are described in ways that match real locations, sometimes locations not thought to have been explored until much later. There are ancient trade routes extending for thousands of miles, connecting distant regions. The organization and maintenance of these routes, the establishment of trade goods moving along them, and the cultural exchange they enabled all suggest more extensive contact between distant regions than is often assumed. Ancient seafaring capabilities might have been more advanced than generally credited. There is evidence of ancient ships capable of ocean voyages, sophisticated navigation techniques, and maritime trade networks spanning considerable distances. The question is how extensive this maritime activity was and whether it might have included voyages not recorded in surviving texts. The mystery of ancient preservation techniques demonstrates knowledge of chemistry that seems advanced. The ancient practice of mummification shows understanding of decomposition processes and chemical treatments to prevent them. Some ancient preserved bodies have survived thousands of years in remarkable condition, suggesting effective preservation techniques. Beyond preservation of bodies, there is evidence of techniques for preserving other materials. Ancient textiles, papers, and organic materials that have survived when similar materials from later periods have decayed. In some cases, the preservation seems to involve treatments or conditions that we don't fully understand. Ancient dyes and pigments present their own mysteries. Some ancient colors have proven remarkably stable, remaining vibrant after thousands of years. The chemical composition of some ancient pigments is known, but the techniques for producing them, particularly achieving certain rare colors, remains unclear. Some ancient colors cannot be replicated using known historical techniques, suggesting lost knowledge of pigment production. The phenomenon of ancient cement and concrete that has proven more durable than modern equivalents raises questions about ancient materials science. Some ancient structures built with early forms of concrete have survived in better condition than modern concrete structures of similar age. Analysis of ancient concrete shows it has properties, particularly resistance to water damage, that modern concrete lacks. The composition of some ancient concrete includes ingredients whose purpose is unclear. Why certain materials were added, how ancient builders knew to add them, and how they discovered the optimal proportions all remain partially mysterious. Modern efforts to replicate the properties of ancient concrete, particularly its durability in seawater, have required extensive research into the chemistry involved. Ancient glassmaking also shows surprising sophistication. Some ancient glass includes trace elements that create particular colors or properties, suggesting detailed knowledge of how different materials affect the final product. The temperatures required to produce some ancient glass seem to exceed what should have been achievable with ancient furnaces, raising questions about the technologies employed. There are ancient glass objects with unusual properties. Glass that shows minimal weathering despite great age, suggesting unusual composition or production methods. Glass with optical properties that seem designed for specific purposes, potentially including use in optical instruments, though this remains speculative. The mystery of ancient sound technology extends beyond acoustic architecture. Some ancient objects appear designed to produce specific sounds or vibrations. Ancient bells, gongs, and other sonic devices sometimes show sophisticated understanding of harmonics and resonance. The purposes of some of these devices, beyond simple signaling or music, remains unclear. There are ancient texts describing sounds being used for various purposes, from healing to construction. While many of these descriptions are clearly mythological, some include details specific enough to suggest they might be based on actual practices. The question is whether ancient peoples had discovered applications of sound that have since been lost. The phenomenon of ancient earthquake engineering shows sophisticated understanding of structural dynamics. Ancient structures in earthquake-prone regions sometimes incorporate features specifically designed to resist seismic activity. Interlocking stones that can shift without collapsing, foundations that isolate structures from ground motion, and other earthquake-resistant features appear in ancient construction. More mysterious is the question of how ancient builders knew these techniques were necessary. Did they develop earthquake-resistant construction through trial and error, learning from the failure of earlier structures? Or did they possess theoretical understanding of how buildings respond to earthquakes? The sophistication of some ancient earthquake engineering suggests more than simple empirical learning. Ancient understanding of materials' properties is demonstrated in the selection and use of specific materials for specific purposes. Ancient builders sometimes selected particular types of stone for particular structural elements, matching the material properties to the structural requirements in ways that suggest understanding of concepts like compression strength, tensile strength, and load distribution. The transportation of specific materials over long distances raises questions about how ancient peoples identified and valued particular materials. How did they know that stone from a particular distant quarry was superior for their purposes? The effort involved in transporting heavy materials long distances suggests the materials were valued for specific properties, but how those properties were identified remains unclear. The mystery of ancient mining operations demonstrates organizational capabilities and technical knowledge. Some ancient mines extend deep underground, incorporating ventilation systems, drainage, and structural support. The logistics of these operations, extracting and transporting materials from deep shafts, suggest sophisticated engineering. Some ancient mines show evidence of selective extraction, where particular minerals or ores were sought while surrounding materials were left in place. This suggests the ability to identify valuable materials while they were still in the ground before extraction and processing. The techniques used for this identification, whether they involved visible characteristics or some form of testing, remain unclear. Ancient refining of metals demonstrates chemical knowledge. The production of pure metals from ores requires understanding of chemical processes, control of temperatures, and use of various additives to facilitate extraction. The sophistication of some ancient metallurgy suggests this knowledge was more advanced than often assumed. There are ancient texts describing alchemical processes that, while often dismissed as primitive chemistry or mysticism, sometimes include procedures that, from a modern chemistry perspective, would actually work. The question is whether these represent genuine chemical knowledge or lucky accidents that were then wrapped in mystical language. The phenomenon of ancient batteries or electrical devices, if correctly interpreted, would suggest knowledge of electrochemistry. However, the interpretation of these objects as electrical devices remains controversial. While they can produce electrical current when assembled in certain ways, whether this was their intended purpose is debated. If ancient peoples did discover electrical phenomena, the question is what use they made of this knowledge. The absence of clear evidence for electrical applications in the ancient world suggests either the discovery was not pursued, the applications have left no trace, or the objects in question served some other purpose entirely. Ancient navigation techniques show sophisticated understanding of astronomy, geography, and maritime skills. Ancient mariners were capable of voyages across open ocean, requiring navigation techniques to stay on course without landmarks. The methods used, whether based on celestial observation, current and wind patterns, or other environmental cues, demonstrate detailed environmental knowledge. Some ancient navigational techniques have been lost and later rediscovered. The methods used by ancient Polynesian navigators to cross vast stretches of ocean, finding small islands without instruments, were not recorded and had to be reconstructed through research and experimental archaeology. This raises the question of what other ancient knowledge might have been lost. The mystery of ancient timekeeping devices shows sophisticated mechanical knowledge. Ancient water clocks incorporated complex mechanisms to mark time with reasonable accuracy. The design of these mechanisms shows understanding of fluid dynamics and mechanical engineering principles. Some ancient time devices incorporated features whose purpose remains unclear. Complex gear systems, astronomical indicators, and other elements suggest these devices served purposes beyond simple timekeeping. Were they calculating devices, astronomical models, or something else? The full capabilities and purposes of some ancient timekeeping devices remain incompletely understood. Ancient understanding of human psychology is demonstrated in various aspects of ancient life. The design of sacred spaces, the use of symbols and rituals, and the organization of social structures all show sophisticated understanding of how to influence human behavior and emotion. While some of this might have developed through trial and error, the sophistication suggests more systematic. Ancient texts sometimes describe psychological phenomena in terms that show surprising insight. Descriptions of mental states, behavioral patterns, and emotional dynamics sometimes align well with modern psychological understanding. How ancient thinkers arrived at these insights without modern experimental psychology remains an interesting question. The use of altered states of consciousness in ancient societies raises questions about ancient understanding of the mind. Various techniques for inducing altered states were used in ancient rituals and healing practices. The sophistication with which these techniques were employed suggests systematic knowledge rather than random experimentation. Ancient medical understanding of mental health shows surprising nuance. Ancient texts describe various mental conditions with details that suggest careful observation. Treatments prescribed sometimes make sense from a modern perspective, suggesting ancient physicians had discovered approaches that were genuinely helpful. The mystery of ancient long-distance communication raises questions about how information moved across ancient empires and trade networks. Messages traveled thousands of miles with remarkable speed for pre-modern societies. The systems used to facilitate this communication, the networks of messengers and relay stations, demonstrate impressive organizational capabilities. Some ancient texts describe communication methods whose mechanisms are unclear. References to sending messages over long distances by unexplained means appear in various ancient sources. While these are generally assumed to be metaphorical or mythological, the persistence of such references across different cultures is intriguing. The phenomenon of similar myths and stories appearing in distant cultures raises questions about ancient cultural contact or the possibility of common origin. Flood myths, creation stories, and tales of ancient catastrophes appear in cultures separated by oceans and with no apparent contact. The similarities sometimes extend to specific details that make independent inventions seem less likely. The conventional explanation involves universal human experiences and concerns that naturally lead to similar stories. Floods are common disasters, so flood myths would naturally arise in many cultures. However, some similarities in detail seem to go beyond what this explanation would predict, leading some researchers to suggest either ancient contact or inheritance from a common ancestral. Ancient astronomical myths sometimes encode accurate astronomical information in narrative form. Stories that seem purely mythological, when analyzed carefully, sometimes describe actual celestial events or cycles. This suggests ancient mythmakers were encoding scientific knowledge in story form, perhaps as a wing it. The question of why such would be encoded in myths rather than recorded directly is interesting. One possibility is that narrative form makes information more memorable and more likely to be passed down accurately across generations. Another is that in oral cultures, embedding information in sacred narratives ensures it will be preserved and transmitted. Ancient understanding of agriculture shows sophisticated knowledge of plant breeding, soil management, and cultivation techniques. Ancient farmers developed diverse crop varieties adapted to specific conditions, showing systematic selection and breeding over many generations. The knowledge required for this, understanding of heredity and variation, was clearly present in practical form, even if not articulated as formal genetic theory. Some ancient agricultural practices demonstrate understanding of principles that would later be formalized in agricultural science. Crop rotation, companion planting, and soil enrichment techniques used in ancient farming make scientific sense from a modern perspective. How ancient farmers discovered these practices remains a question. Ancient plant knowledge extended to medicinal uses of plants. Ancient pharmacopoeias describe hundreds or thousands of plants with their medicinal properties. The accuracy of many of these descriptions, confirmed by modern pharmacology, raises questions about how this knowledge was acquired. The trial and error process of discovering which plants are medicinally useful and for what conditions would seem to require extensive experimentation. Some ancient plant remedies contain active compounds that target specific conditions in ways that seem unlikely to be discovered by chance. The use of plants containing compounds that work synergistically, where the combination is more effective than individual components, suggests sophisticated understanding of medicinal properties. The mystery of ancient animal knowledge is demonstrated in ancient domestication practices. Ancient peoples domesticated a variety of animals, selecting for specific traits over generations. This required understanding of heredity and variation, knowing which animals to breed to produce desired characteristics. Ancient texts describing animal behavior sometimes show detailed observational knowledge. Migration patterns, mating behaviors, and other aspects of animal life are described with accuracy. This knowledge required systematic observation over extended periods. Ancient understanding of the environment is demonstrated in sustainable resource management practices. Some ancient societies managed forests, fisheries, and other resources in ways that maintained their productivity over long periods. This required understanding of ecological principles and long-term planning. The question of how ancient peoples developed this understanding is interesting. Did they learn through experiencing the consequences of unsustainable practices, or did they possess theoretical understanding of resource conservation? The sophistication of some ancient resource management suggests more than simple reaction to scarcity. As we reach the conclusion of our exploration of unexplained mysteries, we're confronted with a complex picture. The world contains phenomena that resist explanation, ancient knowledge that seems anachronistic, and capabilities that challenge our assumptions about past civilizations. These mysteries exist not in the realm of speculation or pseudoscience, but in documented evidence, physical artifacts, and observable phenomena. The humbling reality is that despite our advanced technology and accumulated knowledge, significant aspects of our world and our history remain mysterious. The monuments our ancestors built, the knowledge they possessed, and the phenomena they witnessed continue to puzzle us. Our inability to fully explain these mysteries doesn't mean supernatural or paranormal explanations are required. It simply means our understanding remains incomplete. What these mysteries tell us is that history is more complex than simple narratives suggest. Ancient peoples were not primitive or ignorant. They possessed knowledge and capabilities that we're only beginning to appreciate. The technologies and techniques they developed, the knowledge they accumulated, and the achievements they accomplished deserve our respect and continued study. The unexplained phenomena we've explored, from temporal anomalies to geographical mysteries, from ancient technologies to unexplained abilities, remind us that the boundary between known and unknown is permeable and shifting. Each generation discovers new mysteries while solving old ones. What seems impossible or unexplainable in one era becomes understood in the next, while new questions emerge to take the place of answered ones. These mysteries also remind us of the limits of our current understanding. We've developed sophisticated sciences, built powerful technologies, and explored far reaches of Earth and space, yet mysteries persist. This persistence isn't a failure of science or knowledge, but a reminder that reality is complex and multi-layered. The questions we cannot yet answer point toward the frontiers of knowledge, the areas where future discoveries await. The study of these mysteries serves important purposes. It keeps us humble, reminding us that we don't have all the answers. It keeps us curious, driving continued exploration and research. It keeps us open to possibilities, preventing the premature closure of questions that deserve continued investigation. For some, these mysteries are frustrating, representing gaps in knowledge that should be filled. For others, they're inspiring, suggesting that the world still holds wonders to discover and understand. Both perspectives have value. The drive to explain mysteries pushes scientific progress while the appreciation of mystery enriches human experience. What we can conclude with certainty is that our world contains genuine mysteries, phenomena that exist but resist easy explanation. These aren't the products of ignorance or misperception, though undoubtedly some supposed mysteries fall into those categories. These are persistent, well-documented phenomena that have withstood investigation and analysis. The ancient structures that demonstrate capabilities we struggle to replicate, the astronomical knowledge encoded in monuments and texts, the technological sophistication revealed in ancient artifacts, all point to ancient peoples who were more capable and knowledgeable than conventional history has credited. Their achievements deserve recognition and continued study. The unexplained phenomena that continue to occur, from temporal anomalies to mysterious lights, from gravitational anomalies to unexplained sounds, remind us that Earth itself is not fully known or understood. Despite having mapped its surface and probed its depths, despite having studied its geology and atmosphere, mysteries remain. The questions raised by these mysteries are profound. How much knowledge has been lost over the millennia? What capabilities did ancient peoples possess that we've had to rediscover or still haven't rediscovered? What phenomena operate by principles we don't understand? How much of what we consider impossible is merely unexplained? These questions don't have easy answers, and that's precisely the point. The world is complex enough that easy answers are often inadequate. The mysteries we've explored require continued investigation, open-minded inquiry, and willingness to question assumptions. They require rigorous application of scientific method while maintaining openness to evidence that doesn't fit current frameworks. The future will undoubtedly bring new understanding of current mysteries. Technologies we're developing, from advanced imaging to sophisticated analysis techniques, will reveal new information about ancient sites and artifacts. Continued exploration will discover new sites and new evidence. Some current mysteries will be solved. But history suggests that as mysteries are solved, new ones will emerge. Discovery is not a process of steadily reducing the unknown until nothing remains mysterious. Rather, it's a process where each answer reveals new questions, where each layer of understanding exposes deeper layers to explore. The mysteries we've explored span the range of human experience and knowledge. They touch on physics and time, on ancient civilizations and lost knowledge, on phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. They remind us that despite all our advances, despite our sophisticated understanding of many aspects of the world, we remain in significant ways inhabitants of a mysterious universe. This mystery is not something to fear or deny, but something to embrace. It's the source of wonder, the driver of curiosity, the motivation for exploration and discovery. The mysteries that remain unsolved are invitations to continued inquiry, challenges to future generations of researchers and explorers. As we conclude this exploration of unexplained mysteries, we're left not with answers but with enriched questions. We've seen evidence of phenomena that defy easy explanation, ancient knowledge that challenges historical assumptions, and capabilities that resist replication. We've explored time anomalies, ancient technologies, unexplained structures, and persistent phenomena that science has not fully explained. These mysteries exist. They're real, documented, and persistent. They deserve serious study and open-minded investigation. They challenge us to think beyond conventional frameworks, to question assumptions, and to remain open to possibilities we might not have considered. The world is more mysterious than we often acknowledge in our day-to-day lives. Beneath the surface of the familiar and explained lies a layer of genuine mystery, phenomena that resist our attempts to understand them, questions that remain unanswered despite determined investigation. These mysteries are part of what makes existence fascinating. They remind us that for all we know, there's infinitely more we don't know. They keep alive the sense of wonder that drives human curiosity and creativity. They assure us that no matter how much we learn, the universe will continue to surprise us. The unexplained mysteries of our world stand as monuments to the limits of current knowledge and as invitations to future discovery. They remind us that we live in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than any simple explanation could capture. They challenge us to remain curious, to keep questioning, to never assume we have all the answers. In embracing these mysteries, we embrace a fuller, richer understanding of our place in the cosmos. We acknowledge that we're part of something larger and more complex than we fully comprehend. We accept that the universe contains depths we've not yet plumbed, heights we've not yet scaled, and mysteries we've not yet solved. These mysteries are our inheritance and our challenge. They're what our ancestors puzzled over and what future generations will continue to explore. They connect us to the long human tradition of questioning, exploring, and seeking to understand. They remind us that the quest for knowledge is never complete, that there's always more to discover, always deeper to dig, always further to explore. The unexplained mysteries we've explored are real. They exist in our world, documented and witnessed, challenging our understanding and inviting our investigation. They stand as testament to the complexity of reality and the limits of current knowledge. They are ultimately what makes existence an adventure rather than a solved equation. And so we conclude our journey through the unexplained, having touched on mysteries ancient and modern, terrestrial and temporal, physical and phenomenological. We've seen that our world contains wonders that resist explanation, knowledge that challenges chronology, and phenomena that defy conventional understanding. These mysteries persist, waiting for those brave and curious enough to explore them, waiting for the insights that will finally explain them or perhaps reveal even mysteries beneath. The exploration continues, the mysteries remain, the questions endure, and that is exactly as it should be. Throughout human history, there have been phenomena that exist beyond the boundaries of our understanding. These are not myths or legends confined to ancient texts, but tangible mysteries that continue to baffle scientists, researchers, and witnesses across the globe. From structures that seem to defy the technological capabilities of their time to natural phenomena that challenge our understanding of physics. From unexplained disappearances to objects and places that seem to possess properties beyond conventional explanation, our world is filled with enigmas that resist all attempts at rational explanation. Today, we embark on a journey through some of the most compelling unexplained mysteries that have been documented and witnessed across different continents and cultures. These are not stories manufactured for entertainment, but real occurrences that have been investigated, documented, and remain unsolved despite our advanced technology and scientific knowledge. What makes these mysteries particularly fascinating is not just their inexplicable nature, but the fact that they persist in our modern age, an era where we pride ourselves on having explanations for nearly everything. As we delve into these mysteries, we'll examine the evidence, hear from witnesses, explore the theories that have been proposed, and confront the humbling reality that despite all our advances, there are still aspects of our world that remain completely beyond our grasp. These mysteries remind us that the universe still holds secrets, that the boundary between the known and unknown is far thinner than we might like to believe, and that perhaps some questions are meant to remain unanswered. The ancient monuments scattered across our planet stand as silent testimonies to capabilities that seem impossibly advanced for their time. Consider the precision with which massive stones were cut, transported, and assembled thousands of years ago, creating structures that in many cases we would struggle to replicate even with modern technology. The conventional explanations offered for these constructions often feel inadequate when confronted with the physical evidence. Take, for instance, the megalithic structures found in various locations around the world. In South Lebanon, the ancient site of Baalbek contains some of the largest stone blocks ever used in construction. The Temple of Jupiter stands upon a foundation containing 3 massive stones known as the trilithon. Each of these blocks weighs approximately 800 tons, and they were somehow lifted and positioned with such precision that a piece of paper cannot be inserted between them. But even more mysterious is the stone of the pregnant woman, a block that weighs an estimated 1,000 tons, lying in a nearby quarry. How ancient people managed to conceive of moving such enormous weights, let alone actually accomplishing such a feat, remains completely unexplained. The precision required for such construction becomes even more baffling when we examine the cutting and shaping of these stones. Modern analysis has revealed that many ancient megalithic sites feature stonework with tolerances that would be considered impressive even by contemporary engineering standards. The stones fit together with such exactness that the joints between them are nearly invisible, and this precision exists not just on the surface, but throughout the entire depth of the stones. In the high mountains of Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán presents another enigma of ancient construction. The walls of this structure are composed of massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together without mortar in a complex interlocking pattern. The precision of the joints is so exact that the blade of a knife cannot be inserted between the stones. These blocks feature multiple angles and irregular shapes that somehow fit perfectly with their neighbors, like pieces of an incredibly complex three-dimensional puzzle. The conventional explanation suggests that ancient workers achieved this fit through a process of trial and error, repeatedly lifting these massive stones, checking the fit, and adjusting accordingly. However, this explanation is reduced. There are ancient metal objects whose composition and properties puzzle modern metallurgists. Alloys that shouldn't have been producible with ancient smelting techniques, metals refined to a purity that should have required processes not available at the time, and objects that show no corrosion despite being thousands of years old, suggesting either unusual composition or treatment with protective processes we don't understand. One ancient pillar, standing exposed to the elements for over a millennium, shows virtually no rust or corrosion. Analysis reveals it's made of iron with unusual purity and a composition that somehow prevents oxidation. How ancient metalworkers achieved this, whether through some special smelting process, some treatment applied to the finished pillar, or some property of the ore source itself, remains unknown. Modern attempts to replicate the pillar's corrosion resistance have been only partially successful. The existence of ancient batteries presents another puzzle. In certain ancient sites, objects have been found that appear to function as galvanic cells capable of producing electrical current. These consist of clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods, which when filled with an acidic liquid, produce a measurable voltage. The conventional interpretation is that these were used for electroplating, though no definitively electroplated objects from the period have been found. The puzzle is why, if ancient peoples had discovered electricity, there isn't more evidence of its use. Ancient surgical instruments present evidence of medical knowledge and capabilities that seem surprisingly advanced. There are ancient texts describing surgical procedures, including brain surgery, with detailed instructions suggesting practical experience rather than theoretical speculation. Ancient skulls have been found showing evidence of successful trepanation, where holes were bored into the skull and the patient survived, as evidenced by healing around the edges of the holes. Some ancient medical texts describe procedures and treatments that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of anatomy and physiology. There are descriptions of treatments that, from a modern medical perspective, make scientific sense and show understanding of principles that weren't formally established until modern times. How ancient physicians arrived at this understanding without modern tools for studying anatomy and physiology remains unclear. Ancient texts also describe substances and preparations with specific medical properties. In some cases, modern analysis has confirmed that these substances do indeed have the medicinal properties attributed to them, sometimes through mechanisms that require modern biochemistry to understand. Did ancient peoples discover these through trial and error, or did they possess some way of analyzing substances that we don't know about? The the phenomenon of ancient acoustic engineering presents another mystery. Some ancient structures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of acoustics, incorporating features that manipulate sound in precise ways. There are ancient theaters where a whisper on stage can be heard clearly in the back row, hundreds of feet away, without amplification. The acoustic properties of these structures aren't accidental but result from careful design. More mysteriously, there are ancient chambers that appear designed to resonate at specific frequencies. When sound at these frequencies is produced in these chambers, the entire structure vibrates in ways that create unusual effects. Some researchers have reported that these resonances produce altered states of consciousness in people present in the chambers, though such claims remain controversial and difficult to verify. In some ancient structures, there are features that seem to serve no structural purpose but which create complex acoustic effects. Certain walls or pillars, when struck, produce musical tones. The tones from different elements sometimes form harmonic relationships, suggesting deliberate tuning. Why ancient builders would go to such effort to create these acoustic features remains unclear. The alignment of ancient sites to each other presents another layer of mystery. There are claims that ancient structures separated by thousands of miles are aligned to each other with precision, suggesting intentional relationship. When lines are drawn connecting certain ancient sites, the lines pass through multiple other ancient sites, creating a network of alignments that seems unlikely to be purely coincidental. The interpretation of these alignments is highly controversial. Skeptics point out that with enough ancient sites worldwide, some alignments are inevitable by pure chance. They also note that the Earth is curved, so straight lines on a map don't correspond to actual straight lines on the ground. However, proponents of intentional alignment argue that some of the alignments are too precise and involve too many sites to be easily dismissed as coincidence. More intriguing are cases where ancient sites separated by vast distances show other similarities beyond alignment. Similar architectural features, similar astronomical alignments, similar myths and symbols, all in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The conventional explanation involves independent development of similar ideas, which is certainly possible, but the degree of similarity in some cases seems to strain this explanation. The possibility of ancient global navigation raises questions about how isolated ancient cultures really were. There is controversial evidence suggesting contact between cultures separated by oceans, long before such contact was thought possible. There are plants native to one continent that appear in archaeological contexts on other continents before the generally accepted dates of transoceanic contact. There are artistic motifs and architectural styles that appear in widely separated regions with suspicious similarity. Ancient texts from various cultures describe long sea voyages to distant lands. While these texts are often dismissed as mythology,